Hello, everyone. Welcome on into OneSoccer.ca. Andy Petrillo, Oliver Platt, Gareth Wheeler with you. It has been quite the eventful weekend, gentlemen, and we know the ongoing dispute happening right now between the Canadian men's national team and Canada Soccer. What we know as well was a report first came out on the weekend by TSN's Rick Westhead stating that the players had not practiced at BC Place on Friday in preparation for their game against Panama on Sunday. We then came to learn that it was over the distribution, the allocation of the World Cup money that would be coming their way for qualifying for 2022. They did not practice on Saturday and then, in fact, called off the game against Panama. They have since released a letter, and it's a very long letter. There is a lot to get into, but Ollie, I want to try and dive into this. Was there a particular statement, paragraph that stood out to you when it comes to what the Canadian men are seeking clarity on?
Well, I think it's just that they're seeking clarity, right? And I think that's kind of my overriding takeaway here when I think about it over the last couple of days is that I think something like this, like these are labor negotiations, right? That happens. That happens in every sport where there has to be those kinds of agreements made, and sometimes there is conflicts involved when that happens. But I just feel in a broader sense that this kind of reckoning has been kind of coming for Canadian soccer for some time. And I'm obviously surprised by the way it's rolled out over the last 48 hours, and I'm surprised that the Canadian men have missed an international match in the lead up to a World Cup. But I'm not surprised that this kind of situation has eventually come to a head, because I think, for a long time I've felt, and I think a lot of us have felt, that the way we communicate with each other within Canadian soccer, the way we communicate with the outside world as well, is just not really up to scratch. It's not good enough. The way we communicate with fans, clearly the way we communicate with players who seem to be in the dark on a lot of things that is absolutely baffling that they're in the dark about. And even the way we communicate with each other as well. I think we've all had frustrations on that front, week to week over the past few years. So it just feels like the culmination, I think, of some things that have been lacking in the sport in this country. And I'm not blaming any single entity or individual there. I think it's across the board for some time. And now we find ourselves in this situation at the worst possible time where we've got to work out a very, very complicated set of matters, a few months out of a World Cup here.
I'll get into the letter in a moment. Just big picture, Andy. This is just a horrible situation. Let's be honest here. Everyone loses. There is no winners. Canadian soccer, I mean, I've been involved at various levels my entire life. The story has been one of infighting, of that lack of communication that Oliver kind of articulated, venom being spat at each other rather than working together. It's been an antagonistic relationship. And this goes well below the CSA. This is at a micro level, and it works its way up to macro and vice versa. This is a real sad time that after celebrating just 2 months ago, the way that we did, embracing not only the men's team, the women's team, and the direction and where we're going in this country. I found this all quite overwhelming at times. As it comes to the letter, clearly the men's team is unified in this approach. Clearly there's certain demands that they want. I think that the men will do themselves a favor by maybe even going a little bit deeper into what they mean. They say that they would like 40% of World Cup prize money. We heard from Nick Bontis and Earl Cochran on Sunday night. They said that they were offering 30, 30, 40, which is being widely reported. I think we need to understand whether that World Cup compensation that's expected on the men's part is net or gross, whether this is before or after taxes, because if it's after taxes, not including taxes and 40%, that becomes 80% really quickly, right? And then the whole idea of pay equity, which is clearly important to the men's team, the women's team, the Canadian Soccer Association. That seems to be an area that we're aligned. That's not feasible if 80% of essentially prize money is going one way. So that needs to be clarified, and everything to do with pay equity, because a deal isn't signed unless the men and the women are on board, co-signing deals to do with pay equity. This is something that needs to be flushed out. They've taken a dramatic step here. Like this is an aggressive move that's being fronted by the players that is trying to create some kind of change in in a very in a very difficult way that they're going to get what they believe that they deserve. And um, that's where they are. This, by the way, this isn't about. I think there's a little bit of a misconception that this is about money that was or wasn't paid through World Cup qualifying. The That's a separate deal. This is just about World Cup participating
Mhm.
prize money, which will be given out next January. So there still is. I know that the timing hasn't sat right for a lot of people. There's still a lot of time before this money will even land in their bank accounts, right? So there's time here. It's a very dramatic step, not playing a game. The U.S. has been embroiled in all kinds of labor disputes and court cases for well over 6 years before it was just resolved a few months ago. They didn't miss a game. So it just shows you how seriously this men's team has taken it and kind of the state of play right now in terms of where, um, where things stand.
I will point out one paragraph in particular here as well that caught my attention, and I know it's one that's being discussed quite a bit, which of course is the men saying that they've recently learned about the deal
Right.
signed in 2018 with Canada Soccer Business, that they also feel, as we know, the CSB controls the selling of sponsorship, the advertising, and also controls the broadcast rights. We are one soccer division of Media Pro, right? We're going to put our hands up on that. Media Pro owns the rights to the national teams, the CPL. They purchased the rights for 10 years. The numbers are out there, 10 years, $200 million. And the best way I can describe the broadcasting landscape, because if people say, how did this come to be? It's very simple. So the NHL owns, their rights, and they've opted to sell to Rogers. Sportsnet is a division of Rogers. The CFL, they do their rights. They opted to sell to Bell. TSN is a division of Bell. And it's the very same thing. CSB controls the rights. They decided to sell to Media Pro because Media Pro saw extreme value in the product. And they bet on the players, they bet on the team. And my goodness, has their bet coming to fruition because they saw the value in it? Hence the games being on One Soccer. Because we are a division of Media Pro. That is the best way I can lay out the landscape. And that's how broadcasting rights work. Canada, in the United States. I will say that it is a little concerning if the players, if what they're saying, we have recently learned. How did
Yeah.
they? That's where you start to get concerned, right, Ollie? Because we're not trying to hide anything here, right? I personally thought this was, common knowledge, but it is disturbing if you do hear that from the players, and they should be aware of the deal and they should be aware of the numbers.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at when I said it was baffling that they weren't aware of some things, and the players deserve to be aware of those things, to have transparency around those things. But I think there's been a lot of misconceptions about what that CSB deal is about as well, and it's in a lot of ways it's aligned with what the players want, in the sense that the CSB was created to build the game in this country, to build an actual economy for the game in this country, so that we have the money to invest in all the different areas of the game, such as the Canadian Premier League, such as a Canadian Women's League, such as grassroots youth, as well as the national teams, right? And we didn't at the point at which the CSB was formed, that just didn't exist. When it comes to the broadcast rights specifically, the traditional networks and the companies that own them in this country did not see any value in the Canadian national team, right? We know that the Canada Soccer was having to pay to get their games on cable TV and get them on the air. Media Pro came in, the CSB initially, does this deal which guarantees Canada Soccer income, and I agree. And the CSB is committed to transparency in terms of exactly how this deal works, and I hope we see that. But they came in to try to build the value of the broadcast rights, the commercial rights, the sponsorship, all the rest of it, so that we can actually do what the US has done with Soccer United Marketing, which is obviously a similar thing, to actually build an economy around the sport in this game, and allow the game to succeed and to thrive in this game. So, that is still a very, very early process, but already we're seeing that, and obviously the players are a massive, massive part of this, and particularly this generation of players, but we're already seeing the value of Canadian soccer media rights and partnership rights and all of those things take off compared to where it was a few years ago, because it now feels like we're actually, we actually have an organization that is working to build them and to make the most of the incredible teams we have in a way that hasn't been done in the past. So the fact that, that value has now risen and they're now obviously worth more those rights than they were back in 2018, that's the point. That's a
That is
good
the
thing, right?
point.
That's what we're trying to achieve.
Yes.
And again, the players have played the biggest part in that with their talent and what they've done
Yes.
for this country. They deserve transparency in terms of how that deal works. They deserve to be fairly compensated for their part in that. No one's questioning that. But the idea that the CSB is in some way working against that, I think, is completely the wrong picture here.
Yeah. I have one more thing when it comes to, because I know another, just from people asking some questions there about the length of the deal. These lengths are not unheard of. Again, I go back
No.
to the NHL signing something with Sportsnet for 12 years. Long deals happen. Long deals do guarantee an income that comes in. And this is guaranteed income from a company that saw value in your product. So again, not unprecedented, not unheard of to see these types of long broadcasting
But
deals
it
signed.
and look, aside from the broadcast deal, what has Canadian soccer needed for as long as I've been alive? It's needed opportunity, a pathway to sustainability,
Yes.
opportunity for players. That's why there's the creation of the Canadian Premier League, something that people have been desperate to create and form, a future women's league that we're hoping is not too far away. That doesn't happen without a media broadcast partner and a business plan and corporate sponsors to come on and make that dream a reality. Opportunity for referees to become better, to be able to grow in the game, administrators, coaches who are now coaching in the Canadian Premier League across this country that have aspirations maybe to go somewhere else and do something even more grandiose, broadcasters, journalists, many who lost their jobs because there hasn't been a commitment to covering the game on a regular basis in this country till the last 6 months, by the way. That's changed. Like people in sales, people in marketing, people in corporate sponsorships, like we haven't had any of this. Where were all these great deals that were taking place 5, 10, 15 years ago? They weren't there. We are at the infancy here. People are losing money, but they're investing in this game. So hopefully at some point down the road, everyone makes money. There is prosperity. We're not there yet. We're not anywhere close. This isn't something to fight about. This is something to rally behind. I don't care who. I don't care if who the broadcaster is. I don't care who the group are. Let's build this together. That's my mindset. And the fact that now this is being part of a conversation about a dispute to do with wages. I get it when it comes to sustainability and how best to grow the organization and transparency and trust between everyone. I understand that. I think this is a step forward. In fact, that the players actually want to know what's going on in their country, in their own country when they're living abroad. And quite rightly are concerned about their families and their professional career and their club form and all these different things that life has to throw their way. I think this is a real positive that they want to know how it works. But, let's make sure that everything's being kind of presented with the proper context.
That's exactly it, right? And I just want to reiterate that, I said this about communication earlier. We all have to do a better job of communicating these things, talking to each other, building trust in the way these things are working, right? And the players clearly haven't had that. So to the extent they've needed, the CSB statement, which committed to transparency, I think is a great thing. And now we need to start making sure that everyone has that clarity about how things are working. The players deserve that clarity. There is no question about that. None of us, I think, are sitting here and saying that shouldn't be the case if it hasn't been to this point.
Isn't it alarming? Like when you hear the president of the CSA say last night, and this was the headline, not all this other stuff about the CSB. I think that it'll trickle down into how the business can grow. But when he said that if it was just about taking care of the men's and women's team and nothing else in terms of the responsibilities, what's under Canada Soccer's umbrella, that just it wasn't tenable. Like Do we think he's lying? I don't. I think we all understand how small, and we've documented on this show before, how small Canada soccer is and how limited that pot and fees are, especially coming out of a pandemic when largely the funds that are coming the CSB's way are through those media rights deals. What is it reported? $3 million a year, which helped the national teams continue to play and compete and qualify for the World Cup and go to the Olympics when money elsewhere wasn't coming into the association, when games weren't being played, and when registration kids across this country haven't been able to play. $25 million. That's the size of the business, guys. That's not big. That is a small organization. That's like an eighth man, ninth man in the NBA money. That's what they're making per year. That's the size of Canada soccer right now.
Well,
Let's
and
hope that we
Gareth,
can grow this out and build
it's
it.
not even that you and Ollie, myself, it's not even that we've documented it. John Herdman, has also been very
Yes.
vocal and say when he first took over, he was knocking on doors. Like we know, and this is difficult, but I will say this, and I think we all agree, we've just said it, that it doesn't also excuse Canada Soccer from just throwing up their hands saying, don't got the money, so leave us alone. Hence why the players are saying, well, let's see the books. And this is what they
Exactly,
want
yeah.
to see. And we can all completely understand that. I'm pretty sure if we kept going to our bosses saying, "Can I get paid this?" No, no, no. We're like, "Okay, can I see the books here? Because you keep saying you don't have the money, but I'd like to see the books."
That's what I should do. Okay.
So yeah,
But
but I
that,
will.
that sorry, Andy, I think that is a really, really important point, that we can sit here and say we don't think the CSA is lying about what they're saying with these things, but they need to sit down with the players and lay that out, right?
Mhm.
And really show them how this all works.
And that's why, to your point, so the Canadian soccer business, so CSB, right, as we know, is a panel of a lot of sports business minds, a lot of people involved with the Canadian Premier League. So this is the deal that the CSA signed with the CSB. These are the people who are running. So I think a lot of people, Ollie, are questioning, like, who's the CSB? But Scott Mitchell, chairman of the CSB as well, so involved CPL, involved in CFL, sports-minded individual. They too released a press release, and the very bottom line said, "We are proud of our agreement with Canada Soccer and what it means to the Canadian soccer ecosystem. We are prepared to be fully transparent about our agreement, which has included an unprecedented amount of revenue to Canada Soccer in the past 18 months in the forms of sponsorship and international media dollars." So, Ollie, does that start to give you hope that, yes, there is going to be the transparency that everyone's asking for, and we can move forward with this?
Of course, yeah, and I don't necessarily think it's been the case that people have been trying to hide from that. I just don't think we've been proactive enough in offering that kind of transparency and communication, right? And then when you fail to do that, and again, this goes to a ton of different levels of Canadian soccer, not just the CSA, not just the CSB, I think all over the place. When you don't offer that kind of transparency, you open yourself up to accusations of, oh, well, what is it exactly they're doing here? What exactly is happening here? If we don't have that clear picture of what's going on, right? And I think that's probably how the players feel a little bit right now about the fact that they don't feel like they're fully clued in on how this all works, and that obviously needs to change, as we've said.